Local Digital Television Programme Services, Amendment Order 2024.
Minister, would you be good enough to move the motion?
Thank you. I beg to move that the committee has considered the draft Local Digital Television Programme Services Amendment Order 2024, and it is a pleasure to open the debate under your chairship, Mr Stringer. I'm pleased to be speaking to this order, which was laid before the House in draft on the 5th of November. In just over 10 years since the first service launched, local TV continues to provide local content, including news and current affairs, to audiences across the UK. In doing so, it continues to complement our national public service broadcasters. From Sheffield Live to Leeds TV, both of which broadcast in neighbouring areas to my constituency of Barnsley, to London Live, which broadcasts just a few miles up the road from here in Kensington, and NVTV in Belfast. There are now 34 local TV services broadcasting across the UK. And I was pleased to meet with members of the local TV network in HoC last month to hear more about their services and the work they do. Both organisations are also sitting on the Future of TV Distribution Stakeholder Forum that I am pleased to be chairing. These services bring social and economic benefits to the areas they serve through the making and showing of programmes that reflect the interests of their local communities. But more than that, in a TV sector that is often too centred around London and the South East, local TV provides a training ground for those looking to embark upon a career in the sector. One service, KMTV, has developed a partnership with the University of Kent to train journalism students, while another, Notts TV, has seen former trainees build on that experience and go on to work in the national media. There are 11 services based in the north of England, with 5 based in Scotland, 3 in Wales and 1 in Northern Ireland. All 34 of these services are carried on the local TV multiplex, which enables them to be broadcast on digital terrestrial television, also commonly known as Freeview. The multiplex is operated by HoC, which is co-owned by each of the local TV services themselves. The multiplex plays a central role in the local TV ecosystem by providing subsidised carriages for all of the local services. The local TV sector has not been without its challenges. Some services have struggled to maintain consistent audience numbers and develop stable revenues from advertising. Last year, the TV advertising market in the UK experienced its biggest decline since the 2008-09 financial crisis. Although all commercially funded broadcasters have been affected, local TV services have been particularly impacted as they have smaller audiences than their national counterparts. The previous government made a commitment to extend the local TV multiplex until 2034 and to consult on the options for the renewal or relicensing of the licences for the 34 local TV services. That consultation ran from June to September last year and received responses from existing licence holders, media and telecoms companies, as well as members of the public. In the consultation, the then government outlined its preferred approach of a light-touch renewal process for the multiplex licence led by Ofcom, and the conditional renewal of the licences of all 34 local TV services, subject to Ofcom's assessment of their performance to date and their plans for the next licence period. Respondents to the consultation were broadly supportive of this approach. Some respondents, particularly the current licence holders, did raise concerns about the burden this approach may have on licensees. They also emphasised the importance of the renewal process being completed swiftly in order to provide certainty to both the sector and its commercial partners. My department has taken these responses into account in the drafting of this order and worked closely with the independent regulator Ofcom, who will administer the renewals process to refine its provisions. A previous version of this order was laid in draft before Parliament on the 7th of May 2024, but was subsequently withdrawn due to the general election. The subsequent delay to the order coming into force meant that Ofcom would not have had the necessary time to conclude the renewals process and then conduct a competitive relicensing process in the event that any of the licences were not renewed. This updated order therefore includes additional powers for Ofcom to extend local TV licences with the consent of the current licence holders by a period of 12 months. This extension will ensure that Ofcom is able to complete the renewals process at least 12 months before the extended licences would otherwise expire. This order has been considered by the Joint Committee on Statutory Instruments and the Secondary Legislation Scrutiny Committee. Those committees did not raise any concerns about the legislation. This government believes that the approach set out at consultation and provided for by this order gives the sector the best chance for long-term success and sustainability. It does this by balancing the certainty and stability of a streamlined renewals process with a proportionate degree of regulatory oversight which will be provided by Ofcom. This government absolutely recognises the importance of local media, including local TV. Our vision is a thriving sector that can continue to play an invaluable role by reporting on the issues that matter to communities and keeping communities informed about the local issues and decision making that affect them. The renewal of local TV licences is an important step on that journey. I commend this draft order to the committee.
The question is that the committee has considered the draft local digital television programme services amendment order 2024. Just to remind members of the committee and other members, if they wish to catch my eye, they must bob, as we do in the chamber. On behalf of the opposition, Sacred Batty.
Thank you, Mr Stringer. It is a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship and indeed to see the work of the previous government come to fruition. And the Minister is right, we should be proud of our local TV services and we should not underestimate the importance of local TV services to our local communities. And as members will be aware, as the Minister has set out, the licence for the local TV multiplex for all 34 local TV services are due to expire on the 25th of November 2025. In April 2022, the last government published its broadcasting white paper, which outlined the ambition to make changes to the local TV licensing regime. The changes which will be implemented through this SI will enable the extension of the local TV multiplex licence until 2034 and make it subject to the same conditions that apply to the national digital terrestrial television multiplexes. A consultation ran under the previous government for 14 weeks from 7th of June 2023 on options for the renewal or relicensing of individual local television services and received numerous responses. This included responses from current licence holders, media and telecommunications companies and members of the public. And overall, the responses were supportive of the proposed approach. So His Majesty's official opposition therefore supports this SI, which implements the necessary changes proposed by the last government. The existing regime for local TV does not allow Ofcom to renew the licences for the local TV multiplex or the individual local TV services. This SI will enable Ofcom to run a renewal process which provides scrutiny but is not burdensome, and I hope the Minister will agree with me that the balance is key in this endeavour. For small and micro businesses, a lengthy and costly process will be problematic. Without this SI, Ofcom would be required to launch and run a new licensing round for the local TV multiplex and individual services, which risks putting a disproportionate burden on these businesses without any tangible policy benefits. So I hope that this approach provides stability for local TV services over the next licence period. I'm of course concerned that the disastrous budget that was set out earlier in this year is already impacting business confidence. So can the Minister provide detail on how the government will support collaboration and investment in the sector? Can she also outline how the government is supporting local TV services overcome some of the challenges that they face, including their financial sustainability? And as has been raised in the other place, I'd be grateful if the Minister could detail what steps the government is taking to ensure open competition in future licensing rounds. More broadly, I'm sure that we all agree on the importance of local TV services and the services they bring to viewers across the UK, with significant economic and social benefits. The last government published its vision and ambition for the sector, outlined in the White Paper. We're yet to see any new proposal from the government, but we have been promised a local media strategy. So, in conclusion, Mr Chairman, can the Minister inform us when this will be published and if it is being developed with industry input?
Zoe Franklin.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship, Mr Stringer. So the Liberal Democrats support this statutory instrument, but I wanted to take the opportunity to first put on record how grateful I am to the wonderful services that That's TV, Surrey and other local TV services provide. It's such an important service for residents. It gives them that hyper-local news and current affairs that can so often be missed by other broadcasters. But in conversations with That's TV Surrey, they wanted me to highlight two particular things that just to really enhance the statutory instrument and ask Ofcom to consider it as they start implementation. And that is that over the period when they come to renew, they are really asking that Ofcom are very clear about what that renewal process looks like. TV companies are aware that presenting a business case that lasts 10 years in the ever-changing financial climate is going to present a challenge to them. So they would appreciate clarity as soon as possible on that process to prevent it becoming unduly burdensome and potentially damaging to the local TV operators that the statutory instrument seeks to preserve. And the other point they encourage me to make, which I completely agree with, is that as many of us will be aware, on Freeview, local TV services benefit from EPG prominence regulated by Ofcom. However, there is no guarantee of either carriage or prominence on digital apps, which are now being planned by local TV operators. So the request really is that the government work with the industry to secure a pathway for local TV to launch their apps on internet-connected television sets to ensure that residents across the country are able to continue to see their local TV services and access those local TV feeds. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Springer. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship. Can I start by saying I am generally a supporter of local TV. That is perhaps used to be somewhat more controversial than it is today. Local TV was invented by our right honourable friend, the member for Godalming and Ash, when he was Secretary of State, and his mantra at the time was that why should Birmingham, Alabama have a TV station and not Birmingham, England? And that was widely recognised, but it is certainly the case that in the subsequent 10 years local TV has struggled. It has the advantage of EPG prominence, number 5 slot in most parts of the country, and it has survived mainly by combining local television news and content with cheap programming from which it derives advertising revenue. It is a difficult balance, and some stations have been more successful than others. I would have to say that I think London Live has possibly not been as successful as some others. If you happen to watch Mr. Stringer London Live, you'll find an awful lot of 60s comedy shows, if that is your particular taste, and not a huge amount of local content. And so we come on to the issue of the licence for the next 10 years, and I would ask that the Minister indicate to Ofcom the importance of local content. If local TV is to be of value, it needs to provide content which people want to see about their own community, but which is not available on the regional TV stations. And coming from Essex, I can say it is deeply frustrating that my local TV provided by ITV or BBC tells me what is happening in Cambridgeshire and Norwich, which is not of huge interest to my constituents. So actually, local TV has a real role to play. Now, one of the consequences of the difficulty that local TV stations have had is that there has been a huge amount of consolidation over the course of the last 10 years. Now, ownership, in my mind, is not the most important thing. It is content. And therefore, Ofcom, which have the job of actually laying down the licence conditions, do need to make it clear that that is the priority, particularly in the area of news, on which they will be focused. As both my honourable friend on the front bench and the Liberal Democrat spokesman have said, the task of drawing up a business plan to cover 10 years is actually quite challenging. And therefore, I hope that Ofcom will give guidance as to how they anticipate that being done and how actually they expect television stations to set out a business plan for a period, a decade ahead. Which brings me to the other point which the Liberal Democrat spokesman raised, which is very important. The Minister and I will recall, I'm sure with great pleasure, our exchanges during the passage of the Media Act in the last Parliament. The prime purpose of that Act for public service broadcasting was to give prominence to public service broadcasting stations on a digital platform. At the moment, they have the guarantee of the first few slots on the EPG, but as we move to a world where people access television through all sorts of different means, there was real concern that they would no longer be guaranteed that prominence, which would result in a drop in viewers, which could result in less advertising revenue for the commercial stations, and less prominence for the BBC. The government, with the support of the opposition at the time, addressed that by giving prominence to the public service broadcasters. But the Minister may remember, slightly unusually, having been first the Minister responsible for the bill, I then moved an amendment to the bill at report in order to give prominence to local TV stations. Because part of the problem is, as we understand it, the Act does not allow Ofcom to come back and to designate other stations outside the main PSBs as requiring prominence. And if the transition to a digital world continues apace as it is doing at present, more and more people will access TV through the internet, no longer through Freeview, and there is not the guarantee of prominence for local TV. So local TV was very clear that they felt they needed prominence. Unfortunately, I was unable to persuade the government to accept my amendment, and so it doesn't currently appear in the Media Act. But I would be grateful if the Minister would look at that, because the answer at the time was, oh, well, local TV doesn't have apps, so you can't give it prominence. But it was a question of sort of chicken and egg, because the providers of local TV said, well, if we give us prominence, we'll develop the app. So I believe that the app is under development, and so that is something which, whilst I welcome the SI today to allow the extension of licences for a further 10 years, it does need to be combined with prominence, and I'd hope that the Minister might address that.
Ms. Logan.
Thank you, Mr. Stringer. It's a pleasure to serve under you today. Although not a member of the committee, I've been asked to speak on behalf of, I think you said 5 stations in Scotland. And I must declare I have no commercial interest in this matter, other than sometimes these stations seek interviews from me, as I'm sure some other MPs as well. It's critical, as some have already alluded to avoid this process becoming unduly burdensome and damaging to local operators. I think if I heard the Minister correctly, she said there would be a 12-month extension prior to the 10-year contract, and that's very welcome if that is the case. These local TV services deliver local news bulletins which provide a real voice for the local communities. And as everyone in this room probably knows, people are getting their news from very many different sources these days, not just the mainstream platforms. As was expected at the time of the original licensing process 10 years ago, these news bulletins are often funded by advertising revenues secured in non-news entertainment programming shown by these services. The aim should be for Ofcom to use this renewal process to protect the viability of the local news and minimise the risk of these services becoming unviable in the new licensing period. Local TV services deliver local news bulletins, as I've already said. The aim should be for Ofcom to use the renewal process to protect the viability of the local news and minimise the risk of these services becoming unviable. The government should work with the industry to secure a pathway for local TV to launch their apps on internet-connected TV platforms. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. Well, it's a pleasure to conclude this debate, and I'm grateful to the contributions that all members have made. I think what's clear is that all sides of the House want to see local TV sector thrive long into the future and continue to provide valuable news and current affairs content that meets the needs and interests of those living and working in the communities they serve. And so there's been a number of points raised in this debate, and I'm going to take them in turn. And so firstly, the opposition spokesman rightly talks about balance, and that is something I agree with and this government agrees with. And of course, in my opening remarks, I did acknowledge that the majority of the work was indeed carried out under the previous government. In terms of the process and timescale, something raised by a number of members, we will of course work with Ofcom on any open competition and any future licences. That is incredibly important. To the member for Aberdeenshire and Moray East, in terms of the 12-month extension, that is the key change from the previous SI laid on the 7th of May. TV operators can apply for it if they would like it, and that will make sure there is enough time for the process to take place. We of course agree on the need for a proportionate process for renewal, and we've impressed upon this and will continue to do so and to discuss with Ofcom. There was also questions around our wider support for the sector, and in particular the local media strategy. Now, the Secretary of State has announced plans to develop a local media strategy in recognition of the importance of this vital sector, and we're working across government as we develop this strategy, because our vision, as I have said, is a thriving sector that can continue to play an invaluable role by reporting on the issues that matter to communities and keeping communities informed about the issues and the decision making that is relevant to them. So the member for Walden and others raised an issue around the ability of local TV services to make genuinely local content that meets the needs of local audiences. Now, we recognise that sustainable funding of genuinely local content is not without its challenges. However, this requirement is central to local TV and the audience it serves. It's therefore appropriate that this is considered as part of the renewal process. Before renewing a licence, Ofcom will need to be satisfied that an applicant could comply with the conditions set out in their licence renewal, which in the case of local TV services will include specific and enforceable local programming commitments. Now, a number of points from both the Liberal Democrat spokesperson and indeed the member for Walden and others raised concerns about the issue of local TV services not receiving prominence for their on-demand apps as part of the new online prominence regime established in the Media Act 2024. And I do indeed recall my many happy hours in committee with the honourable gentleman debating this, the Media Bill now Act. And I am familiar with his, as he states, rather unusual amendment. It's a shame that it wasn't a government amendment at the time, perhaps. But at present, local TV services do not have on-demand apps. And as a result, it is, as he will appreciate, difficult to have confidence that such an app would provide significant quantities of public service content that it would put its front and centre. And these are the two requirements, as members will know, of the new prominence regime. And that said, however, we are very aware of the concerns raised by the sector, and that any apps that may be developed or indeed are currently being developed in the future would have the potential to be included in the new online prominence regime. So we are committed to keeping this under review, and as I outlined in my opening remarks, we're very aware of the changing nature of television distribution, and that is why I am chairing a forum to debate, discuss and explore those issues in further detail. Earlier this year, Ofcom published a statement following a monitoring exercise and set out further details about how it will assess whether a service is meeting its commitments. So the conditional renewal of the 34 licences provided for by this order will ensure a proportionate level of regulatory oversight that an automatic renewal process would not. An automatic renewal process would only lead to a period of post-renewal uncertainty. So we think that we're doing the right thing in the way that this SI has been constructed and laid. And so, as said earlier, it will be Ofcom that administers the renewal process in order to ensure that licence holders understand what is required of them. Last month, Ofcom published a statement outlining how they will run the renewal process and what applicants will need to do to have their licences extended and renewed. This has ensured that local licence holders have sufficient time to familiarise themselves with the requirements and can begin preparing their applications before legislation comes into force. Renewing the local TV licences will ensure local TV services receive the same regulatory benefits that they have received since 2013. Services will continue to receive access to and prominence on Freeview, as well as on the regulated electronic programme guides for simulcast, satellite, cable and internet-delivered TV services. It will also mean that local TV is able to continue to make its important contribution by providing pathways for the next generation of journalists and broadcasters wanting to take their first steps into the television industry up and down the country. This is particularly important in a sector where, despite some of the positive progress in recent years, opportunities are still disproportionately concentrated in London and the South East. My right honourable friend, the Culture Secretary, has made increasing opportunities in the creative industries across the whole of the UK, including in the TV sector, one of her top priorities, and we recognise the role that local TV can play in helping to achieve this. So I'm very grateful to members for their contributions and the interest they have shown in the continued provision of local television across the UK. Thank you.
The question is that the committee has considered the draft local digital television programme services amendment order 2024. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Order.